Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our show brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. Want to get rid of mosquitoes, and boy, those little suckers, pun intended, are out already. Call Southeast Termite and Pest Control. If you have a big event at your home or your church, order a one-time treatment to improve reunions, picnics, or wedding days. They can do it all, whether it's monthly treatments or a one-time deal for a big event. Southeast Termite and Pest Control. All right. When we need something done around here, we call Mark Pancratz back in. It's like Anchorman 2. I've got the conch shell that I just go out and blow, and he shows up whenever there's some sort of turmoil in the basketball program or with past coaches. Donnie Tyndall this week annihilated by the NCAA. The NCAA hit with a 10-year show cause penalty, and if he does come back, if somebody hires him, it's a 10-year plus a half-season suspension from coaching. So there'll be no, well, you can hire him, but somebody else has to recruit and all that. No, they want him gone. The NCAA claims he knew what was going on, directed what was going on, and tried to cover it up at Southern Miss. We all know he had been involved in issues at Morehead State. They were hit while he was there. He says that, yes, there were violations that occurred under his watch, but he didn't have anything to do with the academic fraud in terms of letting it go. It just happened under his watch. NCAA obviously feels otherwise, or as he says, they're kind of framing him. Mark, your thoughts just overall on a 10-year show cause and what you read from the NCAA and from Tyndall.
Well, I was surprised in talking to Tyndall's camp and things that you've heard. He was thinking he might not get a show cause at all. And then those in the coaching community thought that it would be severe, maybe 3 years. And for them to throw the hammer of the 10 years and then throw little things in, like you mentioned, of if you do decide to hire him at some point, he's still suspended for that half of season after he's already your head basketball coach. So I was surprised. The other big thing that was mentioned and good for Tennessee is there was nothing that supposedly was found while he was the Tennessee coach for a short period of time, which is a good thing. And Dave obviously Dave Hart made a decision to get rid of him before anything could happen.
You know, and we'll get into the decision to hire him in a second. But when you look at that, the biggest issue to me, if you're Tennessee right now, if you're Dave Hart right now, you're sending a fruit basket to the guy that Donnie Tyndall is upset with, the guy who ratted him out, because he admits there were violations on his watch at Morehead State. He admits there were violations on his watch at Southern Miss. Does anybody here think there weren't going to be violations on his watch at Tennessee? You've kind of established a pattern there. I think Tennessee's lucky that this went down when it did.
I still wonder about that. At Southern Miss, it says he allegedly proceeded on this course within weeks after getting there. Yeah. Well, he arrived at Tennessee, and it's maybe 6 months went by before what hit the fan about the Southern Miss stuff. So you just wonder what went on in that 6 months, first 6 months at Tennessee.
Well, we've wondered this off camera, but there was somebody over there that Tennessee got into school, didn't get into school a lot of other places, but at Tennessee got in. And that I was concerned about that when all these rumors about Donnie Tyndall came up. Now, it looks like Tennessee's clean because they did what the NCAA would want, and that's sever ties. Dave Hart should also be thankful that when he went to the NCAA, they opened up. Now, that could make Donnie Tyndall mad, another thing to put in his lawsuit. But he should be thankful the NCAA actually spilled the beans and told Dave Hart what was coming because they didn't have to. Thoughts on the penalty and what he got?
Yeah, it's impossible to believe as well that if Donnie Tyndall had stayed at Tennessee long term, that violations wouldn't have popped up at Tennessee, if we're being realistic. So it's a chance for Tennessee to cut its losses and do that without financial penalty within the contract and move on. It was a mistake to bring him in, very obviously, but they're able to get out of it. But the penalty and the comparisons to other schools and the violations that they've had, the comparison that's being made is to Dave Bliss' 10-year show cause penalty he got at Baylor, and that does seem extreme, but there was an 8-year show cause to Todd Bozeman at Cal. And if you look at the NCAA findings with Tyndall, they are worse, I think, than what was found at Cal back in the 90s.
Well, there were players who were also getting paid in this. It wasn't just the academic thing. Chuck, when Donnie Tyndall was hired that Sunday, it kind of got blown off at the press conference. He said, well, I didn't know what was going on with the booster. I went to the NCAA.org, printed out what happened at Morehead State. We used it on the show the week he was hired and said, what's Dave Hart thinking? You just had to get rid of Bruce Pearl for these actions a year ago or 3 years ago. Now you're bringing in a guy who has a history of this. Is it a concern? in hindsight, Dave Hart is a lucky man because that was a bad hire in hindsight.
Yeah, I'm glad Tennessee did such a thorough job in the vetting process. You know, and you think about all of the candidates you could have hired, and then you go after somebody and you said, well, we had no way of knowing this. Well, you could have checked into some of the recruits that were on campus. You could have done a much better job if this is the guy you're going to hire after all you went through with Bruce Pearl.
Even if you couldn't know what was going on at Southern Miss, all you had to do was look at the Morehead State stuff. I mean, if I can find it and put it on my show, trust me, Dave Hart could do a Google search. So that one to me was surprising. There are some people comparing this to he got hammered and North Carolina's not getting hit. You know, it's the same old NCAA thing. Is that fair? Because the NCAA hasn't ruled on North Carolina yet. That investigation isn't over. They haven't given a verdict. Plus, Roy Williams inherited the academic fraud. Doesn't mean he didn't take part in it, but he didn't instigate it. I don't think that one's a fair comparison.
Well, no, because they haven't ruled on it yet. So.
Well, and I don't think we've had details of, I think the biggest thing for Tyndall that got him this point is they're saying that they have proof that he misled the investigation, was trying to cover it up,
A
and
fake
was
document.
orchestrating things, whereas that stuff hasn't necessarily been talked about with North Carolina. It may have been with Louisville, with Patino and some of that type of stuff, but there's just so many differences amongst each of those cases.
Well, and the thing too with Boeheim at Syracuse, he got a break in that the NCAA's penalty guidelines, his thing went back so far that the guidelines changed in the middle of it, so they were going to be lighter sentenced because it began under a lighter law, I guess, if you will, at the time. So that's a little different. Those situations aren't a apples to apples comparison, but the NCAA stuff never is apples to apples. No two situations are the same. At any rate, wish Donnie Tyndall well. Feel bad that anybody has to go through that kind of a nightmare and get dragged through the mud. But if you're Tennessee, and Dave Hart especially, you better be thankful that you learned this stuff when you did. All right, when we come back, Tennessee might have a change on its basketball coaching staff. Unbelievably, the person they're hiring is working for someone who's an NCAA outlaw. We'll discuss. Come on back on the Sports Source.